Hello and welcome to today's session with Aspirant and SalesIntel, the blueprint for higher performing ABM campaigns, a part one and a three-part series talking about how to define and research your ideal targets. With you today, you have myself, Ariana Shannon, the marketing director here at SalesIntel. I've been in the SaaS startup space my entire career and have always been working my way up through the levels, and I'm now participating in strategy and data and content and all of the things that go with it. And I'm excited to be joined by Andrew, the Director of Digital Marketing and Communications over at Aspirant. He has more than a decade of B2B and B2C marketing experience, having led a strategy for companies such as Heinz, Valvoline, and PPG. As the Director of Digital Marketing for Aspirant, he incorporates the best practices gathered over his career into efficient, effective programs tailored to engaging the target audiences. So happy to have you. So happy to have you with us here today. Do you want to give just a quick note about Aspirant?
Sure. So Aspirant is a global management and technology consulting firm. We have a really broad array of capabilities. If you want to learn more about that, feel free to go to our website, but we're really based on this innovative approach about using integrated expertise, highly collaborative teams, and focusing on client results.
Awesome. All right. Well, like I said, we've got a lot of content to get through today, but we're going to jump right into about the series and why are we doing this and why is it a series? Account-based marketing is the approach that a lot of people are starting to use. We know that we have a lot of marketers that are going to join us today, and you can't really unpack all of it in 30 minutes. And it's really hard to get more than an hour on everyone's calendar. So with that, Andrew and I, we've created the three-part series that's going to dive into the three core principles when you have to boil it down to its most basic elements of targeting, engagement, and measurement. And so since you guys have registered for this first session, we will definitely get those invites out to you as soon as we have the next ones live. But again, going to keep steaming along. Today's agenda, we're just going to do a very quick recap of what is ABM for people that aren't maybe not as familiar with the term, that are just getting started. How do you get your program off the ground? How are you prioritizing your accounts for outreach? And then, of course, how you can start reaching the right people. So with that, Andrew, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Sure. So I think it makes sense to start at the beginning here about what is ABM, why does it work? You probably heard this term tossed around, but basically it stands for account-based marketing. And when you really get down to its true essence, it's really on this idea about driving efficiency instead of volume. So you probably heard about the spray and pray sort of approach to business development, where you just want to get as many people as possible, reach out to them, and just basically throw something at the wall and hope it sticks. But when you throw a really wide net, it's of course going to have really big holes. And that really means a lot of wasted time, effort, resources in talking to the wrong people. So ABM really is a way to kind of put some time and investment into improving conversion rates, being more efficient by focusing on the right targets. And that's what we're going to talk about today and throughout the rest of this series.
Awesome. So let's jump into it, Andrew. Let's go with actually getting started and prepping for your ABM campaign.
Right. So it can be kind of intimidating. We've only heard this acronym. How do I even get started? But I like to start at the beginning all the time. So that really is tying back to an organizational growth strategy. A lot of companies may say, we're growing, we're trying to sell more stuff. Okay, but how? What are we specifically trying to accomplish together? And then what is the role of this soon to be launched ABM campaign in the terms of what we're trying to accomplish as an organization? What's the role of that? What's the scope of that? How much resources are we going to throw against this and invest as part of this ABM campaign? And then once we understand that, well, let's set realistic expectations that are quantifiable so we can have key performance indicators on what success looks like for this program. And then you want to find out what sort of key market segments do we want to go after as we're driving growth based on that hierarchy of components that we just laid out there. So these goals could be on a couple different fronts. Could be something as financial terms as revenue, profit margin, pretty straightforward, or something a bit more strategic, such as stealing share from a competitor or expanding into new markets. We'll talk a little bit about how you go about building those market segments here in the subsequent slides.
Yeah, absolutely. Because ABM there's multiple ways that you can use it. It's not just let's get more revenue. It's the strategies you're pointing out of what is that specific element, and starting at the base is going to help you do everything else. So sorry, toss it back to you, Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely. That you nailed it. We need to make sure that we're checking the boxes along the way. A little bit of investment along those different elements helps you drive that efficiency that we're going for. So when you think about these priority market segments with the goals we've already established, which kind of companies are going to get us there? Start to think high level. What kind of industries are they in? How big are they? Where are they located? And what are they needing? So this is really we get into what's driving their decisions. What do they need? And how do they make those buying decisions? What's influencing that? What factors? So by kind of getting your minds wrapped around all of these ideas, you can start to have the foundation for where we need to go as we start to narrow down and target even further.
Absolutely. And it translates into the segments that you're going to talk about here, or that you're going to introduce for us, and I'll dive in, of just what is the ideal customer profile and how do we talk about it?
Yeah, exactly. So from those really high level kind of directional ideas, how do we tailor it into an ICP, an ideal customer profile? So if you haven't heard this term, it's basically the description of the company, not the individual within the company, that's a perfect fit for your solution, given those different touch points that we just talked through. So that can be in terms of company attributes, but then also organizational attitudes. So Ariana is going to take us through what kind of ties into each of those different categories.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, even when I've talked about this internally and with other people in different companies and different industries, if you're not familiar with the term ICP, or ideal customer profile, perhaps you've heard it referred to as ideal company profile or target account. They're all kind of synonymous within this, but for the terms of this discussion, I'm used to talking about it in this way. So just you're on my you're on my highway today. We're going to talk about ICP. So yeah, getting into those company attributes. It really comes down into these data elements. So what are the firmographics that you have with it? This looks like industry, the verticals that they're in, the location, the revenue, and the employee count. So what is it about the accounts that you want to go after that where are the trends? Are they all in a specific industry? Are they all in a specific location? Do they have a specific revenue size or employee count that they're bringing in? And honestly, you may not use all of these. If you're in a local area and you have a brick and mortar business with like a 20-mile radius, that's your location. You have target accounts within that location. Or if you're a SaaS-based organization that sells primarily within the US, that targets companies using Salesforce and Gmail, well, there you go. You've got the US and you've got Salesforce and Gmail, which also brings me into the technographics that I mentioned. What are the tools that your ideal customer has? This also can talk about a little bit of their organizational maturity. So for example, not every startup is going to have Salesforce. So if you have to work with a company that needs an established CRM because you're either like you're an operations specialist or you're a consultant like Andrew that's trying to help them make sense of all of this information and where to start, you probably want someone that's a bit more mid-market, and you need to have that in your overall strategy. And knowing that, okay, well, these types of companies have at least this in their tech stack, whether that's marketing automation tools, sales automation platforms, customer relationship management platforms, CRMs, all of the acronyms that you could possibly have. This is a really great place to start. And Andrew, I love our discussions around this earlier. I realized after, or when we were putting this together, that salesographic is technically a made-up word. If you try to Google it, you're not going to get a result. But basically what it means, if you are trying to do ABM on a more consistent basis, that you can use salesographic data or digging into your sales processes to discover how long did it take you to actually close that seven-figure deal. And so you can factor that into your ABM expectations for the next round. And most companies that are doing this on a regular basis will do this quarterly. So they just kind of do it in their refresh and their planning of, okay, which organizations took so long to close? Did we find that there's a new person that we need that's in the buying committee now that wasn't there before? Something that we noticed, sorry, I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself, Andrew, but something that we noticed in when we were doing this exercise, that CFOs popped up more on Q4 closes last year. Makes perfect sense. Everyone is very concerned about their budget. Everyone wants to know that they're going to be in line, especially with all of the unexpected events of 2020 that started happening more. So it's good information to start keeping in the back of your mind, so you can include that not only in your marketing practices and your targeting, but again, also later in the engagement that we have.
Yeah, and Ariana, really quickly here about the sales graphic, I think a really key factor is not only is it going to help you kind of refine your approach for your ABM campaigns, but also roll back up throughout the organization. We talked at the outset about setting organizational goals. Once we have an idea about what this looks like, this can start to influence overall planning and those KPIs, and then what's the contributions to the growth goals, and then so on back upstream as well. So, so it's a really valuable approach as part of getting something that's sustainable.
No, absolutely. And this is something that we as a B2B data provider actually offer within our portal as well. We give our users the ability to search by these, because it's very helpful in order to surface all of those elements up into the top. And even when you're getting into the overall organizational attitudes as well that you mentioned earlier, of which companies are going to be the most receptive and who's ready for this. And honestly, I know that you and I both agree, this is the most critical driver of efficiency in ABM, because it allows you to take that broad net and be extremely focused, not with your time, with your budgets, with your targeting. And a lot of you may have heard this term before of intent data. Can I get some people to pop in the chat and just give me a quick yes or no if you're familiar with it or have heard of this before? You may have also heard this as like buyer intent or buyer interest. And awesome. So you got a couple of yes. Oh, sweet. You guys are already on the program here. It's really helpful because it takes all of these, like if you have 200 accounts that you're going after and you have a 10-person sales team, and they're like, and your salespeople are full cycle, that's a lot to manage at one time. If you can take those 200 and say, okay, here's like the top 10, like this is where we're going to start. That's where intent data allows you to prioritize and figure out what is the environment or the attitude of that organization ahead of time. And since you guys are already familiar with this, you probably already know a couple of sources of intent data, but there are actually a lot more ways to look at this than just the one. You can look at this at content consumption, and honestly, that's form fills. Who's interested in the content that you are creating as your strategy, who is interested in, and honestly, putting layers on that too. So like if you are a dialing service and you create a piece that's about mobile numbers and a VoIP system, and then you also create something about email marketing, that VoIP system piece is going to be so much higher intent than this other one. So even prioritizing, even within your own content that you've created. Third-party review sites like G2, Crowd, Capterra, Gartner, you can also get intent signals there. Who's visiting your profiles, who's comparing you with people. And again, with web visitor identification and visitor intel, honestly, my personal favorite, because we have seen returns on this. With visitor intel, it allows us to reveal the company level of who is at our website. So we have put this on the bottom of our funnel pages. So trial submissions, trial pricing demo, all of the like really hot ones that you want to talk to immediately. We can then take that, run it through our ICP, get to our decision makers, and then target those in our outreach. And because of that strategy, 90% of our leads from our paid channel will fall within our ICP. I have taken my wide marketing net and budget and I've dropped it significantly, and absolutely love it. There are other tools that can help you do this, but Visitor Intel is the one that we provide. And then of course you have other data providers, not only just SalesIntel, but Bombora, 6sense. There are many places that you can find this from. I will say that not all intent data is created equal. Please do your research, understand where they're getting it, because just because a blog, just because like a blog says, oh, I looked at clouds, doesn't mean it's the digital cloud. So you really got to watch that. Andrew, I don't know your experience with it. I went off on the sidebar there for half a second. But yeah, very important that you understand who you're working with and where you're trusting those sources.
Yeah, this was a new concept to me just last year. So it's really been invaluable in really focusing our efforts for a variety of different reasons, but primarily for sales outreach.
No, absolutely. Because intent data is so impactful in all of the aspects of it, of the sales outreach. So which accounts and contacts are you putting in the actual sales campaigns and cadences? Which ones need to go to retargeting? Which ones do you want to add multiple layers on top of? And you can do a lot of it at once. It just depends on, again, what is the focus of your ABM campaign? What do you want to get out of it? And where are those people engaged? And so with that, we're going to jump into, we've been talking very high level about the company. Let's get into the decision makers a little bit more and around finding the right contact and the right people. And that starts with understanding how are the buying decisions made at the organizations that you're targeting. And especially what a lot of us have heard before, the buying committee, the larger of an organization that you are trying to target, the more decision makers you are going to encounter. That is one of the key differences between an ABM campaign for an SMB versus an enterprise. You have more people to consider, you have more people to convince, but you do have to start somewhere. Because you definitely don't want to be spraying and praying. So it comes down into things like the job title or the role that this person is in, and also the level. Andrew, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I would just layer on, you can also tie how are buying decisions made to when are buying decisions made. Like you mentioned earlier in the CFO example, it might make sense if you're reaching out to HR people, for example. That might be a different time of year versus reaching out to marketing people. So that can also add some sophistication and some additional efficiency along the way.
Absolutely. And then it goes into, excuse me, of reaching the right roles at those organizations. And then how are you starting to actually get in touch with them and find those people? When you're getting into just honestly just trying to get a hold of that person is kind of the start. You do need the accurate company data to build all of your ICP, your target account information, but then you also need the accurate contact data. That goes back into efficiency as well. If you don't have accurate email addresses, I've read whole ebooks about email domain reputation and maintaining that. You have to make sure all of your data is clean in your outreaches for your marketing side and for your sales side as well.
Yeah, I would say that's the second driver of efficiency beyond just behind intent data is having the accuracy of that information. Otherwise, you're emailing to wrong email addresses or you're calling people that are calling inaccurate phone numbers. Just ends up in a waste of time.
And yeah, we do have a Q&A at the end of the session, Mark, but if you guys have them, please feel free to pop in your questions. Because we're going to talk about just a quick recap and honestly give that lead into session 2. So Andrew, I'll let you talk about engagement more. I know you're really excited about this topic.
Yeah, I think this is really in my wheelhouse because with a background in brand management, brand marketing strategy, this is where you take all those components and really make them work. And apply a little bit of art to the science and the operational kind of process of reaching out to people. So I'm really excited to get into that. We've teased it a couple times throughout, but yeah, next session is going to be awesome because that's another way to drive efficiency. Getting the right contact information is one thing, but how do you get their interest? How do you get their eyeballs, and how do you get them to take action? So that's what we're going to be talking about in the next session.
No, absolutely. And honestly, Andrew, I have been asked this question recently as well of, I have the intent data, I have the contact data, but they won't bite. What gives? And that's what I hear from people every now and then. And honestly, it comes back to that engagement. Are you talking about what they want? Like, and sorry, won't get ahead of myself, or otherwise I'll start going down that rabbit hole. But yes, let's bring it all back together. And please feel free to go ahead and pop in your questions if you have them. I know we covered a lot of things at a broader level, because with targeting, there is so much that goes into it. I know that I would not feel comfortable saying, you must do this, this, and this, because there are so many variables to consider. If you have specific examples you'd like us to weigh in on, then please add those in. But yes, sorry, getting back to just getting alignment in your organization.
Yeah. So while you guys are kind of coming up with questions and throwing them into the chat here, we'll just revisit all the things that we talked about today with the first set of building blocks. So getting alignment throughout your organization is really critical. Defining what we're trying to achieve as an organization and as an ABM campaign, setting specific quantifiable KPIs that you can measure against, figure out how do you change course, change expectations, whatever that is, but that informs the planning of not only the ABM campaigns, but also organizationally going forward. Really taking the time to understand your ideal customers it sounds so fundamental, but a lot of people just rush ahead and say, I'm just going to start sending emails. Okay, but who are those people? Who are you trying to reach? How are you trying to touch them? What need are you trying to satisfy? So by decomposing and analyzing all of that, you can really drive efficiency and effectiveness. We'll talk about that a bit more in a tangible sense with the next session. So you also want to make sure that you've got the dedicated, reliable source of the data. So you may have the best strategy, the best intentions, you've ticked all the boxes throughout, and you've got all, your game plan all together, but the strategy needs to have that tech enabler. And for us as a partner of SalesIntel, we use SalesIntel, and it's an integral part to how we do outreach. But regardless of the platform you want to go with, you need to have that data. You need to have the robustness, you need to have the accuracy, and that really is what enables you to get all of these things in motion.
Yeah, especially at this early, just this one first component of ABM, of targeting, that is very important, because it allows you to get that accurate information for what is actually happening in the industries or areas that you're wanting to target, and then being able to reach them efficiently. It makes you efficient across the board and will set you up for success. And intent data, honestly, is the key of that, especially with trying to accelerate your pipeline and get things to move.
Yep. Yeah, the spray and pray is, in the past. Let's leave that in the past and get to a much more efficient, effective way to do things. And again, that all comes back to this intent data that's part of these tech platforms.
I've also heard marketers talk about this as batch and blast.
Same idea, yeah.
Yep.
I guess batch and blast would be more about compartmentalized spray and pray to specific segments. I like that too. Maybe I'm going to use that.
Yeah, no, especially when we're working with more lists and things, it's definitely made me chuckle a couple of times. But yes, please add in your questions. We'll be taking those at this time. And I do know that both Andrew and I have a little bit of a gap. So if any of you need to jump off, please do so. You will get access to the recording and this presentation in your inbox tomorrow. But we're here to answer any questions that you guys have at this moment. Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. We look forward to seeing you in the next session as well. No,
so I see a question about how much data do you need to confidently mine this information versus leaning on a tool like 6sense. What sort of data do you mean? Do you mean how tight do you need to be on your targeting parameters? Is that the data you're looking for?
Yeah, I'm going to follow up with that as well. Of how much are you looking for, or are you more or less asking what types of data do you need? because that's typically where I've thought about this before, Mark, of the types of data that you definitely need to be successful is, of course, you want accuracy across the board. You have to have accurate contact data. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get off the ground, even if you're targeting out other information as accurate. Intent data would be that second category of importance. And then, of course, having the insights into the organization, like the firmographics and technographics, it really does help not only from a targeting standpoint when you're gearing all this together, but then also in this next session where we'll dive into the engagement. Because if you can come into that conversation and almost get the sense of you're really hitting it on that message, you will spend less time, or your salespeople will spend less time saying, well, what's in your tech stack versus how have you been using your CRM? It's a very different conversation, and it's going to expedite a lot of those conversations. So did that answer your question, Mark? Yep, awesome. Okay. All right, we'll give it just another second. I'll also go ahead and put these up. Andrew and I are going to be a part of a lot of the sessions here. And so you'll be able to reach us with more specific use cases or questions if you didn't want to discuss those in a more of an open forum situation. Like I said, you will receive a follow-up email with access to all of the information. So you'll have that going forward, and we'll just keep sending that along as we create the rest of the series.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to reach out to us. Another question here is that should the ideal customer profile research be anecdotal for a quick start or validated through fit models? I think that the amount of rigor that you put into those is directly correlated to the quality of the output. I don't think you need to be, paralyzed by analysis, but the more you can put against it, the better. There's probably diminishing returns the more and more you get into the weeds, but having people with those firsthand accounts of who you really need to go after, having like backing and rationale for why, that'll help you move through that very quickly and proceed on to translating those profiles into the inputs into platforms such as this.
Absolutely, Andrew. You definitely want to have at least a baseline of in that first pass, because of course we all want the MVP. We have to start moving. The worst thing you can do is just sit on your hands and do nothing. But it is also important to know you can have that first one, but the more segmented you become into those, whether it's going to be you're focusing on industries, and then you're focusing on the subsets within those industries. For example, if you're targeting information security companies, that is a very broad, actually. Do they do ransomware? Do they do actual on-site protection? Do they do cloud protection? Getting more specific in the engagement, again, what we'll talk about next time, you'll really start to see that segmentation pay off in that. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today for our very first session. When we have the next one up and running, we'll make sure to send you guys the invite. Andrew, thank you so much for your time and expertise today. Can't wait for the next one.
Thanks for joining, everybody.
Awesome. Bye, everyone.